Hi everyone, hope you're all doing well. It's been a minute since I uploaded my last video, but life, well, especially work, got in the way. But still, I didn't want to miss the chance to talk about some of my most recent reads. I only managed to read 2 books in August, so I have included some things that I have also read in September because they have all been really great reads and I want to share them with you. So let's just dive into the books. The first one, obviously, it's Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. What a journey! I finally finished this book. I am so glad that I picked it up. I remember feeling pretty intimidated obviously by its size and also about the classic label, but I was pleasantly surprised about how approachable it really was. I don't know if it was the language or the fact that it's made of short chapters, but it really pulled me in from the very beginning. I feel like summarizing the story as just a love affair story doesn't really do it justice. To me, it's more a story of juxtapositions, so we have life and death, hope and despair, love and hate, you get the gist. The beauty of it is how we transition from believing in extremes to realizing that the truth always falls somewhere in the middle. There are slight deviations as the story progresses because, well, life is not constant and we are constantly shaped by the people we meet and the circumstances that we go through. So consequently, characters go from being this unidimensional thing where, you believe that this one character is blatantly wrong or this one character can only do good, to something that is complex and multifaceted. And that's what makes a story so rich and compelling, in my opinion. And I guess part of the message that Tolstoy wants to convey is that transformation in these characters happen not by them becoming something completely different, but by realizing these hidden truths that they always have had within themselves. And this is especially true in Levin's case, which I guess makes sense because if I remember correctly, he is sort of modeled after Tolstoy himself, and there are certain parallels in how he also discovers religion. But anyway, by the end of the book, I think you are left with this feeling of heightened compassion and understanding, and that's a really good feeling to have when you finish a book, even if it's only for a brief moment, and that's something that we can all really use in how we perceive others. So yeah, I'm really glad that I picked this one up, and I'm looking forward to reading more from Russian authors soon. Actually, following on the same vein of Russian authors, the next book that I read was Memories from Moscow to the Black Sea by Teffi. Teffi is the pseudonym of a very famous Russian writer that I cannot pronounce. I will just insert it somewhere. This book is a non-fiction book. It's actually a memoir and covers her journey into exile from 1918 to 1920. And well, she left St. Petersburg with the excuse of going on a tour to read from her works, and the journey itself is quite chaotic and bizarre. She goes from Russia to Ukraine until, well, the end of the book is her boarding on a boat to go to Constantinople. Before going into this book, I had read that this author was known for her use of humor and satire in her works, but I could not really imagine how that could have any place in a book like this. As I kept reading, however, I realized that it's precisely the use of humor and the fact that characters are portrayed as caricatures that makes these memoirs so gut-wrenching. It really hits you when you least expect it. There is this overarching sense of death and threat on every page as she continues her journey fleeing from the Bolsheviks, and her colleagues and friends keep disappearing and getting executed. So obviously this is a very dark and emotional read. I don't know if resilience is the right term for it, but it was very shocking to read this contrast between people turning up dead in the streets, the uncertainty, the sound of gunshots, versus some people clinging to whatever they could in an attempt to keep a sense of normalcy. And sometimes this apparent shallowness is not only a refuge, but I guess in a way it's also like an act of defiance. The next book that I read was A Brightness Long Ago by Gavriel. A couple of videos ago I mentioned that this was a standalone fantasy, and now I am not so sure that's the case, sorry. But I realized that there are other books that are set in the same universe, so to speak, but still, you can read this book as a standalone fantasy. So this is an interesting blend between historical fiction and fantasy. I am not usually drawn to historical fiction, but I think it was the writing that pulled me in from the very beginning, because it's very beautiful and poignant. So at the start of the book, we have one of the main characters, Daniel, retelling his life story. He's the son of a tailor, which means that there is not a lot in store for him in the future, but through different circumstances he ends up attending this famous school and meeting some of the most notable people of his time. So there are several reasons why I enjoyed this book so much. I think the characters are very well crafted, and I enjoyed seeing how different events played from different points of view. But I think the main reason why I enjoyed it is the writing style, coupled with one of my favorite topics in literature, and that's destiny and the choices we make. In retelling his life story, Daniel ponders about how his life could have played out differently, how he seemed to have this choice at the beginning between a life of peace and a life at court. He's also a very clever narrator, because there are certain moments where he points out that he's in this point of no return, where some choices had some unforeseeable consequences, and he talks about fate and impulses, but at the same time he's also very self-aware, because as the narrator he knows that he's pulling readers into his story the way that he wants to, so he may be omitting certain details or exaggerating those to his favor. And while reflecting on his youth, he thinks about the passage of time, and this is one of the parts that I enjoyed the most. Daniel talks about how memory and identity are interweaved, how we carry certain memories through life and how they come to shape our identity. So in the end, these are stories that he's crafting using his memories in an effort to better understand himself. So to reiterate, if you're in the mood for a slow-paced read with really beautiful prose and characters that are fully realized, so they are not just pawns in Daniel's story, then I really recommend this book, and I'm really looking forward to reading more books by this author soon. The final one that I want to mention is Strange Beasts of China by Jiang Yi. And this one is a tough one to categorize. There are traces of noir, folk tales, magical realism and fantasy, I suppose. The story takes place in Yongan, and this is a city where human and beasts coexist, but the relationship is somewhat complicated. The beasts live their lives separately from humans, and some are more elusive than others. Some are a commodity, some offer refuge. Actually, part of the point is getting to know the beasts, so I won't go into details. But the unnamed narrator, who's a zoologist/novelist, is commissioned to write stories about these beasts, and through these stories we gradually learn more about her background and how she becomes acquainted with the beasts. What I liked about this book is, well, the fact that it's stories within stories, and the idea that we are all made of stories. I think unconsciously or not, the main character was trying to bridge the gap between human and beasts. Actually, there's a point in the book where she considers her life to be over now that all stories have been told. The stories themselves are pretty formulaic, so they all follow a similar pattern, where the author leaves certain clues here and there, certain events unfold, and finally there's like this big revelation. And the outcome of that is that the main character reformulates what she believed about the beasts and also about her life. It's as if while she's writing, she's also questioning her own reality. And the categorization of the beasts becomes more complex as the line between humans and beasts gets more blurry. So they are clashing and merging at the same time. I have to admit though that certain stories were a bit difficult to follow, at least from my point of view. and I found myself going back several pages to make sure that I understood the twist. I don't know if that's me and my short attention span though, but in any case I would definitely recommend this book if you're in the mood for something dark and mysterious. I hope you found something interesting in this list. I'm always happy to hear your recommendations, so if you have any, just feel free to leave a comment. As always, thank you for watching until the end, and I'll see you in the next one.